Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. My name is Connor, and I'm one of your hosts. Today with me, of course, are my two co-hosts, Stephen and David, as well as some really special guests that we have today to talk about to join us in our topic, which is, of course, DeMolay. I have AJ and Eric, which I'll allow them to introduce themselves in a minute. But first, it's important to note that our opinions are our own and do not represent any of our Grand Lodges, because there's a few of them represented today, nor do they represent any concordant bodies, including the International Order of DeMolay or DeMolay Canada. Now, with that said, I'll pass the torch on to Steve and let him introduce himself.
Hi, thanks, Connor. My name is Steve Chung. I am a senior DeMolay from Beaver Chapter in beautiful British Columbia. I'm a two-time past master councillor, Chevalier, Cross of Honor, a bunch of other pins on the wall. And I'm a past master of my lodge here in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is Prince Charles Lodge, number 153. And I'm a member of the Valley of Vernon Scottish Rite.
And I'm David Colbeth. I'm from Washington State, just south of Seattle. I'm a Master Mason, and I'm not a DeMolay, but I am a DeMolay chairman for my local chapter. Past master of my lodge in King Solomon, number 60 in Auburn. I'm a member of Scottish Rite as well. Look forward to the meeting today. AJ, we'll let you go.
Sure. I'm AJ Brendel. I'm a past state minister councillor of Minnesota DeMolay. I've been a member of DeMolay for about 7 years now, and then I was also a squire, which is sort of the younger version of DeMolay, for 4 years before that. I have been a Master Mason for almost a year at the Anoka Lodge in Minnesota, and I currently work as a member of the Minnesota DeMolay state staff as the Director of Chapter Success, where I basically go around to chapters and make sure that they have the resources that they need to be successful and have a good DeMolay chapter.
And on to Eric.
Hi, I am Eric Hart. I am the provincial advisor, or as some may call it, the chapter dad for Alberta DeMolay. I am also a senior DeMolay, past master, a bunch of other awards that were mentioned earlier. My primary role is to just help the boys understand what's going on and to keep the advisors in line. And
Before we get started, I'll give my DeMolay bio, I suppose, as everyone else has. I am the immediate past Provincial Master Councillor of British Columbia and Yukon. I also hold an honorary title as the Honorary Provincial Master Councillor of Alberta. So I'm basically Mr. DeMolay for Western Canada. Or at least I like to think I am. Now, before we get super into it, let's talk about how our viewers can interact with us. Of course, you can talk to us with the live chat, which is here on YouTube. The other way that you can contact us and just talk with us both during the podcast and after is down in the description. There is a link to our Discord server. If you go on there, is a perfect way to interact with us and give your opinions during, before, and after podcasts. So, with that said, let's talk about DeMolay. The first question that everyone seems to ask is, what is DeMolay? Who wants to respond to that?
Let's give it to the young guy.
I'm assuming I'm the young guy. DeMolay, I mean, the very basic description of DeMolay is that it's a youth leadership organization for young men. It's an international organization. It's in several different countries and I think every U.S. state. It teaches leadership skills like public speaking, communication, and event planning, and all sorts of skills that DeMolays will use not only in DeMolay and in Freemasonry, but outside in their normal lives too. Beyond that, for me, it's been a place to find friends and brothers and people that I can trust with my life. And basically anywhere in the world I can go and find a person that I can trust. And so that's what DeMolay has really meant for me.
Fantastic. What does DeMolay mean to you, Eric?
I mean, similar to what was said before, it's a place where you can trust people, where you can go and not just find, friends that you would typically see in a school or a work setting, but people that really try to better themselves in everyday life. And so it's not just that you're finding people that you can rely on when you need something, but it's people that you can always understand will be trying to be the best that they can possibly be. And so it's really a hub of people that are in all ways the kindest, the nicest, and many other words that I can't even think of in just one central location. Because the organization's values and its techniques and what it does, not just to the young men, but to the adults themselves, it really transforms the way you interact with the world and the way you interact with people.
Wonderful. So we've got two different bodies represented here. We've got DeMolay International and DeMolay Canada, which both have their own governance and leadership. But I was wondering if we could discuss how the chapters are run, how they work, and then on like a state or a provincial level, how that is governed, because that is something that I've always found quite interesting, and it's one of the things that has separated DeMolay to me from like the cadets or the scouts or any other youth organization.
Yeah. So it kind of a little bit varies from depending on which jurisdiction you're at. So each jurisdiction has an executive officer, and the executive officer is kind of the the big decision maker in that jurisdiction. I guess they can really dictate how chapters are run, but in most states that I've ever been to, chapters are primarily run by the youth. We have a master councillor who's kind of like the elected president, who runs all the meetings. He puts together committees. He communicates with all the members to make sure that they know about upcoming events and all of the things that are going on. And it's all run by the youth. We have advisors, like several of you are. We have advisors who are the adults that kind of guide us, make sure we don't burn the buildings down or go against our insurance or anything like that. But for the most part, it's really youth run. We get to decide what we want to do, where we want to do it, how we're going to get there. If we want to go to Disney World, we can go to Disney World, but we have to figure out how to fundraise for it. We have to plan all the details. So it's kind of interesting because it's different from other organizations in that the kids are actually the ones making the decisions and the plans.
Wonderful. Just something that popped into my mind there is back when I was Master Councillor of Phoenix chapter in Victoria, British Columbia, our senior deacon was a guy named, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But anyway, one of the senior deacon's job is to go around and light and extinguish the candles which surround which are in the chapter room. And at our chapter, our candles were just like lights. You flick them on and off because of our insurance. But there was this one time where the senior deacon was going around and his cape got stuck on one of the candles and the candle fell over. Like, it wasn't a real candle, it was a light, but it fell over. And to this day, he is still referred to as Brother Fire Hazard.
It's too funny. That actually reminds me, we used to have a saying back in the day: if it's not illegal, immoral, or fattening to the advisors, you can do it.
Well, I think we do plenty of things here that are fattening to the advisors, I'm sure. So
Yeah, it's always fun when you go to a potluck and it consists of chips, soda, and pizza.
You mean the four food groups?
Of course.
I mean, that seems like just the DeMolay food triumvirate.
That's right. Ice
I
cream.
mean, maybe donuts.
Yeah, usually some kind of ice cream treat in there as well.
Yeah. Man, I used to look so good before DeMolay.
Yeah, I didn't have the spare tire that I've got now, But back in the day, there were in the Lower Mainland, in the Vancouver area, there were 17 chapters. So there was always something to do. 5 nights a week, there was something either DeMolay or Joby related that we could do. And, it kept us hopping. I don't know, what's the number of chapters like now where you're at, AJ?
In Minnesota, we have I think 6 or 7 like active chapters. We've got a couple of ones that are in the outskirts of the state that are a little bit smaller and haven't been active for a while. But we have a solid 6 or 7 that are active. Most of them are in the Twin Cities area. We don't have nearly as much as we did from what I heard, like 20, 30 years ago. But we're growing, we're making new chapters, and so we're doing pretty well.
So one of our viewers just posted a comment in the live chat, and he said, each of you having been involved with DeMolay in a leader setting, what do you count as your favorite moment?
Our favorite moment in DeMolay as a whole, or our favorite moment being a leader?
Let's say being a leader. We'll start with Dad Hart.
Sure. My favorite moment being a leader. I would say my favorite moment was when I got to be the master counselor of my chapter. And this was quite a few years ago now. But it was fascinating for me to join the chapter, to sit somewhere in the room and to sort of see the boys in the chairs and to see that, like, this is something I could become if I worked hard and I wanted to be it. And so it was a very emotional moment for me when I finally got to be master counselor, because you have to start as junior, then you have to go to senior, and then you become master. And it's this long process that just fascinates you when you're finally there, because you start to think, oh my God, I'm finally here. Like, what do I do now? And that's actually, I think, a big part of why the advisors really help to shape the master counselor, because when you're there and you're just like, oh my God, it's like, I need people to show me what I'm supposed to do now that I'm actually sitting essentially on top. And my biggest moment for me as a leader was finally getting to be that point and realizing I still had so far to go.
Nope, there's a new face.
Oh.
Looks like Ernie Loiselle.
Oh, hi.
So Ernie Loiselle is our other representative for DeMolay Canada. He is the President of DeMolay Canada. So yeah, as we were saying, we are talking about what everyone's favorite memory or our favorite moment from being a leader in DeMolay. So we've had Dad Hart, and now I don't know if I'll ever be able to call you Dad Brendel. I'm sorry, Brother AJ.
Not quite yet. So that's Dad Brendel's my dad. So I think my favorite moment as a leader in DeMolay was it was actually, a lot of people would say, the beginning of their state or jurisdictional master counselor term, like getting that collar and being able to speak in front of everybody. But for me, my biggest moment was actually the end of my term. It was the night before the banquet where I was going out of office. And I was sitting down at a bonfire with all the members. And one of the guys from my chapter came up to me, and he was like almost crying. And he said, I'm going to miss you as my state master counselor. And he gave me a hug. And then we spent the night talking about how he could be a state officer in the future and what he can do when he gets to master counselor of his chapter. And so it was really cool for me to kind of see firsthand the impact that I had over the past year on a particular young man, and then being able to see that he has plans for the future to do the same things that I did, hopefully even better. So that was really a cool moment for me.
Fantastic. What about you, Steve? Do you remember way back when in the antiquity era when you were an active DeMolay?
Actually, I do. My memories don't really start before DeMolay, right? But they do start from DeMolay time, so that's a good thing. Actually, I have probably the coolest memory. I mean, I have a lot of cool memories from DeMolay, don't get me wrong. But I gotta say, the very best one, bit of a story to it, but I got roped in when I moved to Kelowna to come and help a master mason who just had keys to the hall and didn't know what to do, but he was left in charge of the chapter here. And, you know, they really poured on the oh, they need help thing. And just a couple hours a month, man, if that's all you can give, that'd be great. And I said, sure, I'll come and give some guidance. And, you know, on the second visit, I got a key and said,
That was a bad thing to say.
huh? Yeah. And so, then right at that moment, I got the keys given to me. The rest of the chapter had been suspended, and they all quit. So I had one boy that was just initiated, and he was described to me by his parents as an ADHD, bit of a closet kid that didn't come out and socialize much and whatnot. And he's sitting there at the top of the stairs with me, and he says, well, nobody's here, so now what, right? And I told him, well, you can pack up your bag and we'll go home, call it a day, or if you're willing to do all the work, I got the knowledge. Like, I don't have time, but I can tell you what to do, and we'll rebuild this chapter. And he said, what's involved? So I explained the 6 steps to success, or 7 steps to success back then, and he said, let's do it. And I said, oh, man. Yeah. But the coolest part was watching that kid come into himself. And I got to give back that which I received as a young DeMolay myself. I had joined at DeMolay at 14, and I was on my own. And I had a chapter dad that took me in like family, picked me up for everything, made me feel part of the group. And, you know, this was my opportunity to get back. That young man, of course, we rebuilt the chapter, and it survived for years after. And he went to BCIT and became a kid who builds video games and things like that, for apps for your phone and stuff.
That reminds me of one of the joining requirements for Phoenix chapter. When we go and meet you for your examination, the first question we ask is, all right, do you like video games? And if you say no, you're out just immediately.
Yeah,
not gonna happen.
Yeah. So Dan Brown went on to build video games, and he was still a bit of a shy guy, but one day they were presenting the game that they had built for their team project, and the guy who was supposed to do the presentation didn't show up. Well, he just grabbed what he could and made shift and went up and did the presentation. Called me right after, told me about it, how exhilarating it was, how scared he was, and that how DeMolay had given him the skills and tools to be able to pull that off from no prep. And it was like, yeah, that felt good, right?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave? I know that you were never an active DeMolay, but you're a chairman of a chapter. So what's your proudest moment being in that capacity?
Well, I wouldn't say proud necessarily, but just memorable, and I guess proud a little bit that kind of what Adrian here at Hart, we're both talking about. Every 6 months here, a new leadership takes over generally. Sometimes the guys have to extend and do another 6 months, but every 6 months, I think, is one of my proudest moments, or happiest moments, and most memorable. There's a new, it's amazing to see the transition just in 6 months from a young man to an adult, and how he can grow. And there's been a couple of them that have been more special. I've seen him as they join DeMolay and as they move up through the ranks and then becomes master councillor. There was one in particular that he was kind of a shy kid and didn't really talk a whole lot. And on his outgoing speech, he actually presented around the room without paper. He had a whole lecture that he presented on his own, encouraging the guys of the chapter to continue to grow and to do the right things. And it was just amazing. I thought we all kind of looked at each other, where did this come from out of this shy kid? And so it's been moments like that. Again, every 6 months, I think, are really the most memorable times of my DeMolay.
Definitely. What about you, Dad Loiselle?
How many memories? You know, I can't ever remember a time not being a DeMolay. I'm celebrating my 50th anniversary this year. I've got two really memorable times as an advisor. The first one was about 1992, 93. I had just moved to the Toronto area from Montreal, and was probably the only time that I wasn't a chapter advisor and or chairman. My wife and I went for lunch at the local restaurant, and we had a waiter in the other section giving me the eye. And I couldn't figure out what this guy was all about, but he kept on giving me that stare. Finally, he got up enough nerve and he come over to me and he says, "You're Dad Loiselle, aren't you?" And I went, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, people do call me that." And he said, "Well, it's me." And he gave his name. And I kind of went, "Yeah." I remembered the name, but I couldn't put exactly where I knew him from. And he said, "My dad died when I was 15. He said, Mom suggested I join DeMolay. He said, you were my chapter advisor. He said, you made such a difference in my life. You helped me through the hardest part of my life. He said, I am today what I am because of you." My wife had to stop me from crying in public.
That's beautiful.
It really was. And the other one is a young man who has since become a very good friend. Joined the chapter, was the odd one. He had Asperger's, really had trouble understanding black and white, and was a little bit of a cast, even though he, you know, the guys really took to him. He was always the guy that wasn't picked to be on the ritual team or things of this nature. We opened a new chapter. We had two boys, one from the Horace Mundy chapter in Whitby, and him from the other chapter. They came on board because it was a lot closer to both of them. We had to pick and choose as to who was going to be the first master counselor. Well, the boys chose him, believe it or not. And he went on to become the first Chevalier from that chapter, the first anything from that chapter, first of that chapter to join the provincial team. It really showed to me the brotherhood and the development processes within DeMolay and how they can change a young man's life incredibly. He's now a master mason. He's going through the chairs in his lodge and all of those other things. And every opportunity he can, he points out to us just what a great day it is, and how much he appreciates what DeMolay did for him. And it's always fun to have those type of success stories.
Definitely.
And everybody else on the panel can share at least one story like that.
Absolutely. Well,
Definitely.
I suppose I'll give you my story. I've got two that I want to share. One of them is a little bit more of like something that I'm really proud of, and the other one is my favorite moment that I felt most most humbled by, like what I was doing in my leadership role made a difference in someone's life. So the moment that I'm most proud of is DeMolay. We'll talk about this more in a bit, but some of my closest friends and the people I trust the most I met through DeMolay. And one of them has since become my best friend, even though he lives in another province. And even though I sometimes wonder if he cares more about history than ever, calling me back. So
Totally don't know who you're talking about.
He was provincial master councillor of Alberta the same year that I was provincial master councillor of BC Yukon. And I got invited to go to his conclave. That's where I met Dad Hart. And while I was there, I shared a room with him and the chairman of the conclave, who is currently the provincial master councillor, Brother Trevor Yee, right? Trevor Yee?
Yep.
And they kept kicking me out of the room. So I would come in and be, to get changed and be like, all right, Connor, you got to go. I'm like, why? Well, provincial stuff. Dad Slade is going to come up and we got to have a meeting. I'm like, okay, fine. And the first couple of times it was just annoying. But after like the 8th time, it started to really piss me off. And I'm like, all right, guys, this is my hotel room too. Go meet somewhere else. I want to have a nap. I just went curling. My knees hurt. Let me go sit down. And they kept kicking me out. And at the final banquet, or maybe one of the formal events, the provincial master councillor, whose name is also Eric, asked me to come up to the east. So I'm like, all right, what did I do this time? And it was then that he presented me with a plaque declaring me to be the honorary provincial master councillor of Alberta, which I still have on my wall. And it turns out that the entire time that he was kicking me out of the room, it was so that he could actually build the plaque. Dad Slade never showed up, which, made me a little less annoyed about it all. But getting presented with that plaque by the person who was and still is my best friend is one of my favorite moments. And then the other moment where I feel that I was able to actually help someone and use my leadership position for the good of what DeMolay is about was when I was provincial master councillor. I had a brother call me, and this brother was in tears. He had just found out some really bad news, and I was the first person he thought to call. So I figured out what was going on, got in my car. It was like the middle of the night, but I got in my car and I went and picked him up, and we sat and chatted for several hours. And I helped him through a really tough time. And I'm super humbled. Ooh.
Ooh.
Ernie, I think there's 2 of you here.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. All right.
I could have solved it.
I'm super humbled by the ability, or by the fact that I was given the ability to help that person out. So those are my 2 moments.
That's pretty cool. So River just posted in the chat there again, and that is a good story to share because, but I'll give you the short version. He said one of the coolest stories was when I told about how I got left behind in the States. So when I was 16, I had joined the carnival, and I went and I worked illegally. They smuggled me across the border at Niagara Falls, went down to Daytona Beach on the A circuit, and one day, to keep the story short, came back to the compound, and all the trucks and equipment was gone, and my bag was on the outside along with the other guy that was there. And we looked at each other and go, what the heck? Now what? Right? So I actually made time to contact the local DeMolay chapter while I was having time off in Daytona, got together with them, and then, what was I going to do? First thing I did was I called the DeMolay boys that I got in touch with while I was down there, and their dad drove an hour and a half to come and get me. hour and a half home. And then, you know, I had a little bit of cash left in my pocket. I was just shy of $50 short for a flight to Seattle. And my aunt lived there. So he made up the difference. And Mom washed my clothes, repacked my bag, gave me some money, took me to the airport the next day, and saw me on my way. And I'll tell you, no better feeling than knowing that you're going to be taken care of like brothers. And, you know, it's those kinds of experiences that stand out for me. My best friends today are my DeMolay brothers from back then. We still get together. We still celebrate 50th birthdays and things like that. More so than any of the friends I've got since that time as an adult and whatnot. So, you know, it's really about the brotherhood, guys. And when you're traveling and you're stuck, it's no different when you go into masonry. Find a hall, knock on the door, and you'll be taken care of.
Well, if there's anyone there.
Yeah.
So, just continuing on with what you were saying, I agree. All of my best friends are DeMolay, be it active or senior. Most of them are senior because I'm getting on in age. I'm almost as old as you are, Dad Loiselle. But like I was saying, Eric, the past master councillor of Alberta, not Dad Hart, the other Eric. There's a few of them. It gets a bit confusing.
Yeah, you have no idea.
is my best friend and the person I trust the most. And Dad Biss here in Victoria is another person that I trust impeccably, and someone who I call upon when I need help. And even Dad Loiselle here, he's one of the people that I call when I want an honest opinion about something.
Yeah, well, he was. That's a really cool story about meeting Dad Loiselle, because I met him via a whole different avenue, which is even really kind of a cool story. But I'll keep it brief, unless, of course, Dad Loiselle wants to tell it.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. So I was collecting aprons to take to Cuba for lodge. As I go to Cuba, I take stuff down there for them, and I was going through the aprons, repacking them, folding them nice, and putting them in my bag. And you know, it's slid out of one of the pockets was this past master's jewel, and I was like, "Hey, this is kind of cool. This is unique, right?" And I wonder where it's from. So I looked it up, and on the back of it, it was 1974 from Victory Lodge, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? Well, I can't just, you know, who around here knows about that, right? You know, because I looked it up. It's in Ontario, right? And so I'm on this Canadian Freemasons Facebook site. So I thought, why don't I just pop it on there? I took a picture, popped it on there, and you know, within minutes, same day, anyways, Ernie messaged me, and he can tell that side of the story a whole lot better. Go ahead, Ernie.
Well, actually, our deputy grand master had signed the post, and he flipped it over to me and said, "Isn't this your lodge?" And I went, "Absolutely." We looked at it, and it was funny because we had given out the last of our past master's jewels when I assumed office as I'm master of the lodge this year. And it was real interesting. Steve was very kind. I was just going on vacation. He was going on vacation. So we said, well, when we're both back, we'll worry about it. And lo and behold, for my first meeting this year, I got to present to the lodge 3 past master jewels that we had managed to uncover over our winter break. And Steve's was one of them, and it was the preeminent one because it's the original design. So everybody in our lodge was real thankful.
That's really cool.
I'm just trying to find the poster, the picture of it, because it's a beautiful piece. What's the engraving on it, Ernie, or the picture?
The picture on it is I just forgot the name the goddess of war.
That's it.
I just forgot her name. I'd have to look at my actual my lodge website.
So, while you're looking that up, Ernie or Dad Loiselle, we've been doing a lot of reminiscing. This has become a group of old grumpy DeMolay, senior DeMolay, discussing the good old days when everything was better than it is now.
Oh,
But no, I'm joking about that, you know. But what would we'll talk. We'll get Dad Hart and AJ here to comment on this. How would you say that DeMolay is involved with and affected by Freemasonry? How come it's important for the average Freemason to get involved with DeMolay?
You want to go ahead with that one first, or?
Oh,
no,
you
go
go ahead.
ahead. Go ahead, Adrian.
I think, well, for starters, I think it's important for the average Freemason to get involved with DeMolay because, you know, DeMolay makes young men better, and those young men are going to be the ones that are leading the world in the future. And so I feel like all Freemasons should have an interest in that because we're making the leaders of tomorrow, and obviously that's something that we should all care about. Every human should care about, preparing our youth for what's coming up in their lives and for leading the world. But a little more specifically, well, first of all, DeMolay is impacted by Freemasonry because every single DeMolay chapter has to be sponsored by a Masonic lodge, and the chapter chairman of the chapter has to be a Master Mason. So we need Freemasonry to survive as an organization. We cannot exist without Freemasonry. The other benefit that a lot of Freemasons will see from DeMolay is that a lot of us end up joining Freemasonry. When my dad turned 18, none of his parents or relatives were Master Masons, but because of his history in DeMolay, he decided to join a lodge, and that was the same with me. When I turned 18, I joined a lodge, and it's because of the fact that throughout my DeMolay career, I had such an active and supportive lodge that kind of showed me, these are the kind of people that I want to be with. So if you're concerned as a lodge about membership or just wanting to gain more members in general, DeMolay is a place to look for, not just for new members, but for the type of people that you want to be members in the future as well.
Fantastic. What about you, Dad Hart? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh boy. Just
throwing the tough questions at you.
Yeah. Say it one more time just so I completely understand. Because I've been trying to think and it's a little hard.
What is the significance of DeMolay in Freemasonry, and why should the average Freemason get involved?
See, in Alberta, I find that a lot of the Masons don't know about DeMolay. Like, there are far too many times when I'll visit a lodge and I'll, just in passing mention DeMolay, and then there'll be a bunch of quizzical looks like, what's that? Like, I didn't know about that. And then I'll find out from all of these different Freemasons, oh, like, I have a son about that age. And it always makes me think, maybe there isn't enough, I don't know, advertising of some kind. Maybe we just don't visit enough. Maybe the Freemasons aren't coming out enough. I don't know. It's a little hard to say. When it comes to the role of Freemasons in DeMolay, I would say that it's the same as any other adult, really, because it is meant to be a youth-led organization. The boys are meant to plan things. They're meant to understand them and work within their own terms, not just follow what the adults say. So, as much as I agree, like, some things kids can't do, right? Kids can't have credit cards and they can't, go buy a car and drive somewhere. So you need the adults to do that.
I mean, they let me buy a car.
I'm sorry, so sorry for everyone in your everywhere.
Wow.
But The adults and the Freemasons are really supposed to be there as a sort of a helping hand. Do they play that role or don't they in every case? I mean, I obviously can't say. I haven't seen every jurisdiction out there. But at the very least, when it comes to the jurisdiction that I'm a part of and the executive team that I'm a part of, I would say that the Freemasons hold no grandiose role any more than just someone's regular parent would. They're meant to be an advisor. They're meant to help the boys, not instruct them.
You know, the hardest thing I found to do as an advisor is to let the boys fail.
Yeah.
Hardest
That's
thing to do, but that's the best thing we can do to help them learn.
Yeah.
So I'm not an advisor.
Me neither.
You're not an advisor either. But Dad Hart and Dad Loiselle and Dad Colbeth, you guys are. So what is it like to be an advisor, and why should the average Freemason look at becoming one, or even just the average adult?
Well, I'll shoot in here. Dad Loiselle kind of let something go that probably was a little bit personal, and so I'll mention that as well. My dad passed when I was just 8 years old. I just turned 8 years old, and so I didn't have a immediate father as I was growing up. But I didn't have DeMolay, but I had other youth organizations, whether it was church or community or other groups, and so that's why I think the DeMolay is so important, in that it fulfills that role, or can fulfill that role. I consider that I had many dads, many fathers, so to speak, over my time, because the leaders, the men leaders in my church, or again, those community organizations, filled that role, and I looked to them for the things that I liked and also the things I didn't like, and tried to not duplicate the things I didn't like. And the things that I did like, that I saw they did, I tried to duplicate those. And so I think that's exactly why Freemasonry should be involved with DeMolay, and more involved with DeMolay, is because those things are embedded in Freemasonry as well. And who are we to teach? Just like AJ said, the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. And so if we as Freemasons do what we say we're going to do, is to help them become leaders, become men.
Wonderful. What about you, Dad Loiselle?
Why should Masons become involved in DeMolay? What a question. Not only is there the benefits of watching young men and being able to provide the support that they need, there's also the ability to turn around, and you will find that every DeMolay chapter in existence has young men that join Masonry. The young men whose parents are active Masons typically go to their dad's lodge. Understood. The other young men who come from the non-Masonic families, it's amazing how many of them join Masonry within the first 3 years of becoming of age. And typically they join the lodges that their advisors belong to, because they got anywhere from 7 to 9. In my dog and pony show, I always turn around and go, they have a preconceived idea of why they need to join Masonry. DeMolay is not to raise junior Masons. Absolutely, as AJ said, it's to make young men better. And on the Grand Lodge scheme of things, isn't that what Masonry is all about? To make men better? And so the values that we have as Masons are definitely the shared values that we extend to our DeMolay youth. I was fortunate. my dad was my chapter advisor, and he got involved in DeMolay as a result of myself and my three brothers all becoming DeMolay. And he stayed on long after he should have, because it was what he believed in. And he fed that to me. And so I've spent, as I said, the better part of 50 years involved in every aspect. I've been an advisor continually since 1976. And I've done every level of being involved. And when I talk to the Masonic community, I push that forward, and so it becomes not a speech, but an inspired message. Because I firmly believe that without the Masonic involvement into DeMolay, there'd be no use. It'd be another scout troop. The payback is manyfold. Not only does it hit on the cornerstones of what Freemasonry is all about, but it gives us an opportunity to influence young men who, as AJ said, become the leaders of our nation. Excuse me, my soapbox is getting falling.
No problem, Dad Loiselle. So we've talked a lot about DeMolay, the past, and I do want to go into the present. There's a question that I want to respond to in the comments. But I think one question, and I'm going to get the active DeMolay among us to respond to this, the baby of the group. What is required to become a DeMolay? Say I know a young lad, a teenager, who I think would be fantastic for DeMolay. Well, how do I get him to join, and what are the requirements for membership?
The requirements for membership are pretty small. We don't have too many. You have to be between the ages of 12 and 21. So that means having reached your 21st birthday. I guess if your 21st birthday is tomorrow, you can join today and be a member for a day, but as long as you're not quite 21 yet. We also have squires for, I believe now it's 9 to 12. So if you're anywhere in between, you're able to not become a member of DeMolay, but at least be involved with DeMolay and become a member of squires.
We need that in Canada.
Yeah.
I talked a long time about the squires program, but
We do have squires in BC.
And then you have to have faith and power, just like with Freemasonry. It doesn't have to be any particular religion. It just has to be because we do have prayers during our meetings and ceremonies. And one of our 7 cardinal virtues is reverence for sacred things. It's the general idea of having some sort of faith, and good moral character in general. And then our members have to vote on every single new member that joins. So if the members, for whatever reason, don't believe that a candidate is a character, then they need to not elect them to receive the degrees. But those are the only requirements.
Wonderful. So with that said, if you know of any young man who falls under those categories and you think might be beneficial or might enjoy joining the Order of DeMolay, Google us. Reach out to your local lodge. Try to find a chapter, because as you've probably heard throughout this podcast, DeMolay is a life-changing organization.
So start DeMolay chapters in your lodges if you don't have one nearby. So like when I joined, the closest DeMolay chapter to me was 45 minutes away, and I went there for a while, but then my dad and I decided that we wanted to start a chapter in where we live. So we decided to do that, and it's definitely possible. With the right amount of work, you can start a DeMolay chapter right in your own lodge as well. Fantastic.
So Eric Anderson, well, I'll talk to that in a sec. But Aaron Brendel, is that your dad?
Yes, sir.
AJ,
Yes, sir.
you're a bit blurry to hear.
Blurry to hear. That's
If
an
that makes
interesting.
sense.
Yeah, he is my dad.
He just said, "Why am I an advisor? Because someone once did it for me."
That is what he would say. Yeah.
So anyway, going back to Eric, Anderson, not Hart. He said, "What could we do to improve promotion of the organization?" So what are your guys' thoughts on that? How could we improve promotion of the organization?
Take every opportunity that you get and talk about DeMolay. Be positive and talk and
Fantastic.
talk and talk and talk until you no longer get the opportunity to talk.
Is that why people stopped inviting you to parties, Dad Loiselle?
That's exactly why people stopped inviting me to parties.
You know, if they go back to the 7 steps to success and think about trying to get into doing presentations at the schools, or when they're having a fair, have a booth, have something that brings it to the attention of the youth of today, because unless you're in their computer screens or their phones or their games, you're not in their visual, you're not getting any of their attention, so they don't know about it. And so, you know, the best thing to do is get out there and spend a little money if that's what it takes to get a booth. But more importantly, when you do that, have the numbers show up, have membership show up, so there's not just 1 or 2 guys manning a booth. You know, it's. I like the Squires thing you're talking about. We didn't have that back in my day. So I'm glad to hear that we do have something like that here, because nowadays, if you don't get their attention before they're 10, or you know, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to get it.
I've had a lot of fun with the Squires. There's a photo around there somewhere of one of the Squires wearing the Provincial Master Councillor's collar. I know in some American jurisdictions that's taboo, and that would indicate that Squire will never be Provincial Master Councillor. But here in BC, it's like the Miss International Cape and Crown. We just got to throw it on everyone who wants. It's what makes it fun.
I would say there's at least two things, really 3. One, you have to have fun events. There has to be some fun happening in the DeMolay chapter. This goes for Masonry as well, but more importantly for DeMolay and for the girls as well. You have to have fun events. And 2, you have to invite people, invite your friends, invite the friends and family to those fun events, and invite your advisors too. That's actually kind of how I got hooked into this. I would say the current dad advisor was a friend of mine through Lodge, and he invited me to the fun stuff, the guys, the overnighters and things where the guys kind of let loose. So have fun events and invite people to those fun events, and your chapter will grow.
I can certainly agree with that, and I also agree with the whole idea of, you know, just talking about DeMolay. We always tell our chapters that the way to be successful is to have fun events, but not just every once in a while, but have them on a regular schedule, because that way our members will know about them and be attending. And if we're providing substance that our members are enjoying, if they're enjoying the fun events, if they're having fun, if they're learning things, that's what's going to make them want to talk to their friends. Our most successful chapters are the ones that have all these fun events, and then their members are enjoying it, getting involved, and talking to their friends about it. Just sending out an email to people saying, you know, this is coming up isn't really going to get much traction. You need to have a consistent schedule for a pretty long period of time. And it's a kind of a slow build, but your members will start to talk about it with their friends, and it'll snowball. And we've got like a whole school that the kids are talking about it all the time in their school, because so many of them are members of a chapter and they always have fun.
Definitely. So we are coming up on an hour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite anyone in the comment section to give any last questions or comments before we close. Dad Loiselle, I believe DeMolay this year is 100, and I know that you were alive when Franklin founded it. So why don't you talk about that?
Actually, I wasn't.
I'm pretty sure you were there, Dad Loiselle.
He died the year before I was born.
Ah, okay. So let's talk about the centennial, because it's a big year for DeMolay.
Well, across Canada, our various jurisdictions have done quite a bit. British Columbia has something coming up in May. Ontario had two celebrations, one of which was in my own chapter, where we had our local alumni association do some ritual presentations, and they used some of the active members from the chapter. That got a little bit of international recognition in the fact that we had representation from the Supreme Council of the Philippines and the Philippines government. Their ambassador here is a senior DeMolay, and he came down for the day. Ontario itself had a big celebration, probably our largest Sweethearts Ball and Grand Masters class on March the 24th, where we did a DeMolay degree for 15 new members. So all in all, it went fairly well. This week, we are getting together with the Manitoba DeMolay in Winnipeg at the Conference of Canadian Grand Masters, and we're going to break bread with some of those young men to just kind of feed their fire.
On the topic of young men, make sure you say hello to Most Worshipful Brother Barry Birch. He just this year got his honorary Legion of Honor, so make sure you give him a hard time.
Well, that's good to know.
On the topic of different events over Canada, if you want to bump into me in person anywhere, I will be at the White Rock Masonic Temple on May 25th for British Columbia's centennial, and I am hoping to be at the Edmonton Shrine Centre on the 17th of August for Alberta's. So Eric or Dad Hart, make sure you start warning everyone that I'm coming back.
Oh no. I mean, yay!
I'm bringing my honorary provincial master councillor plaque with me too. Just gonna wear it around my neck, like I'm a rapper or something.
Oh no!
Oh no! So what about what are they doing down in Murica?
I didn't even know that there was a centennial coming up. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
no,
sure.
We've been doing a lot of things. If you're talking about, I can't, I guess, speak for every jurisdiction. In Minnesota, we've had two different sort of centennial events. We had our centennial, our official centennial event on December 1st, where we had a Grand Master's class degree for some new members, and then we had a centennial banquet after. And what was cool about that banquet is we actually had a DeMolay International Hall of Fame member attend the banquet and give a speech about how DeMolay affected his life. So that was a really cool event that we did. We had a lot of people there that maybe hadn't heard of DeMolay before or hadn't been around DeMolay in a long time. And I think an important thing to remember is this year is the centennial year, but DeMolay continues after this year. And with all of the attention that we're getting from these events, take that opportunity to take advantage of that. All the people that are hearing about DeMolay for the first time, get them involved, get them helping after the centennial year. Maybe they'll be around for the 200. You never know.
I plan on being around for the 200.
Yeah, me too. It's a long ways away.
I've been telling everyone in Grand Lodge of British Columbia that they're going to have to mint 100-year jewel for me.
Maybe.
So we've got one final question from River Peatman, who is the immediate past master councillor of Fraser Valley chapter, which is one of the best chapters. Just saying. And he said, Connor and Eric Anerson have really inspired me to become a better DeMolay and to be better in general, which I'm really touched by. Thank you, brother. Who has inspired you guys? So who has inspired me? Eric Anerson has inspired me. He constantly makes me want to be a better a better DeMolay. And even though he's not a Freemason yet, he still is the reason why I strive to be a better Freemason. Yeah. So what about you guys? Who inspires you?
Oh, wow. I would actually agree with you on the point about Eric Anderson, because him and I joined our Edmonton chapter as members on the exact same day. We were initiated together. And sort of growing up as friends, I really got to understand what Eric was like and just how inspiring he really is as a person. How he sees the world and how he always sees the best in people is just, it was something that really pushed me to want to be my best in DeMolay and outside of DeMolay. In terms of not just my best friend, but for like probably older people that inspire me, I would say I was heavily inspired by my executive officer, Dad Slade.
Dad Slade. I love Dad
He
Slade.
him and I can have disagreements, but he will always be civil and he will always talk to me and help me to understand if I don't understand what's going on, and he will always be willing to listen to me and change his views when he knows it's for the betterment of the organization. And while some people may, bark and bark and bark all the time, he will always keep a level head and stay true to what he believes in. And it was something that really inspired me growing up with DeMolay.
Fantastic. What about you, AJ? Who inspires you?
I've got a couple. There are some obvious ones. My dad, he got me involved with DeMolay for the first time. He took me to my first event when I had no idea what it was. And ever since then, he kind of showed me the way. I remember a really early conversation where I wasn't even an active DeMolay yet. And he was asking me if I wanted to be a state master counselor. And I was like, geez, Dad, you take it slow. I haven't even joined yet. But he's always pushing me to do better. There was an early state master counselor when I was probably 12 at my first ever conclave. There was a state master counselor that told me, without even knowing me, he was like, "You're going to be a state master counselor someday," and that was something that was really inspiring to me to hear. And then I'll kind of end with the big one that I'm sure anybody who knows me has probably heard this one before. But at my first really big out-of-state event, which was the Frank Marshall Ritual Tournament in Dallas or in Texas, I was pretty young and I was with a group of guys and we were getting ready to go into our ritual competition, and I was obviously super nervous. It was my first big competition, and there was a really tall guy, probably like 3 times my height, that came up to me wearing one of those fancy collars, and he shook my hand. He said, "Hi, my name is Chris LeBaugh," was his name. And
Dad LeBaugh. Love Dad LeBaugh.
After talking for a while, I learned that he was the International Congress Secretary, and it was just a really cool conversation. It wasn't anything about DeMolay. It wasn't him trying to be anything he wasn't. He just wanted to talk about me, and that was really cool as a young member. And I saw that he was wearing a tie, a black and red and white tie that I had seen a bunch of other people wearing. And I said, "Where can I get one of those ties?" And he said, "Right here." And he took it off of his neck and put it on mine. And I still wear that tie to this day. I used to wear it to almost every single event. And I think that moment, I didn't obviously know it at the time, but that moment kind of taught me that each and every one of us, especially in DeMolay, but just in the world in general, has the ability to make an impact on everyone else's lives with just some tiny things. Something as small as taking a tie off of your neck and putting it on somebody else's can make a huge impact on their life. And, it has a domino effect on the world in the future.
Just so I have the right people in my head, is Chris LeBaugh Dad Tom LeBaugh's son? Are they related?
I
No,
don't think so. I think it's a different spelling.
Okay.
yeah, it's a different spelling. One's L-E-B-A-W and the other is L-E-B-A-G-H.
Okay, cool.
Right.
One's
And then the last inspiration, I think, is just, every single member of DeMolay is constantly inspiring me, not only to do better myself, but just the fact that they're able to to go through their lives, because we have members that struggle with things like depression and anxiety. They have to go through school. They have to, some of them deal with hard housing situations and family struggles, but they still make it to DeMolay events. They still are constantly trying to be better people, and I think that's really inspiring to me, is to just see the amount of different experiences that we have and how they live their lives.
Fantastic. What about you, Dave?
Well, there's a couple people that inspire me as well, and Eric Enerson, I think, is probably. No, I'm kidding. I have a pretty long story at how I got started. I won't go through the whole thing, but there's a local gentleman that I got to meet. I didn't know who he was. He just was the guy down the street that was introduced to me when I was joining Masonry, and his name was Al. I didn't know who he was, or he just was the guy down the street. We had a cup of coffee, and he knew way more facts and figures and details about Masonry than anybody should know, I thought. And I was pretty decided I was going to move forward with Masonry, and he just kept coaxing me. And later found out that he's Al Jorgensen, of course, and he was a senior DeMolay, past master counselor, past state master counselor, past master of his lodge, past district deputy, past grand master, and now SGIG of Washington for Scottish Rite. So he's got pretty long lineage there. But he just was Al. He just was Al down the street, had a cup of coffee, and chatted with me about Masonry and about becoming, joining the organization. I didn't know that's who he was, and so he's been a constant mentor to me, and he was my coach as I went through, and I didn't know anything about all that stuff as I learned more. And so, but kind of like AJ said too, all of the guys are mentors. As I mentioned, all of the guys, I still look to men as the dads, so to speak, and the things I like, I try to duplicate, and the things I don't like, I try not to duplicate.
And what about you, Steve? Who?
I'd have to say, there's a few. Eric is number one on the list, I'm sure. But amongst them be Larry Wingett. For those of you who know him, he's quite inspirational to me. But no, really, the man who moved quietly and modestly in the sphere of his life, yet never got to be a Freemason because he was too busy giving time to DeMolay. Which is Dad Ben Thompson. He was the chapter dad that made me feel like I was important, made me feel like what I actually said mattered. And like AJ said, he listened to me, right? And he's now passed on, and probably the coolest thing about that was I think there were more DeMolay at that service than at a conclave, and that just goes to speak to who he was and why he was so inspirational to many, not just me.
Fantastic. What about you, Dad Loiselle?
I have too many to mention.
Is one of them Eric Enerson?
Believe it or not, absolutely. I find Eric is a godsend. He has volunteered so much of his time to some joint projects that we're involved in. I look forward to my conversations with him. Absolutely. He's inspiring. I would think of the guys that are still alive, I have two that I look to. One is Tom Lavaugh, who the past executive officer for Pennsylvania DeMolay, and a good friend. A good friend. He's currently the executive director for the Pennsylvania Youth Foundation. He's retiring in a couple of weeks by the end of the year. And the other is Keith Klein. Keith Klein, the Grand Secretary of DeMolay International, a man I consider a friend who can always tell me things the way they are, or as he perceives them, and right or wrong, it's an opinion that I respect.
Wonderful.
very glad to see that Speedway chapter just did a class in his honor on the weekend, which was really well. There have been so many men who have affected my life throughout the years. And the one that I try to live to his memory is my own dad. My own dad was very involved in DeMolay, extremely involved in masonry. Never became a master because he couldn't learn the work. It was all he could do to memorize his obligations, but he lived his entire life to them. And I hope one day to be half the man he was.
Fantastic. Well, I think everyone here is in agreement that DeMolay is a fantastic organization. It's brought all of us together. It's really, I think, it's made us who we are, and I think anyone would be. I think it's a perfect place for anyone, between who are in that age group. So, with that said, I do have one piece of non-DeMolay related news coming out of the Grand Lodge of Minnesota, and it's not the best news, but I still wanted to bring it up. I'm just pulling it up on my phone here, and I'll read the article that I have, and it says, "Tragic news from Minnesota this Easter weekend. Most Worshipful Brother Stephen D. Johnson, the newly elected and installed Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Minnesota, Ancient, Free, and Accepted Masons for 2019-2020, passed away very suddenly to the Celestial Lodge on Saturday, April 20th. He had only been in office for 1 week." Grand Lodge has issued a simple statement at this time, and no further details or funeral service information as of yet. So I speak on behalf of all of us here on the podcast that our hearts and prayers go out to the Grand Lodge of Minnesota and to the family of our departed brother.
So mote it be.
So, with that said, thank you everyone for listening in today and joining us in this discussion. It's fantastic to have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people on the panel today. Thank you for AJ and Dad Hart, who Dad Hart found out that he was appearing on the podcast this morning.
Oh, no, I found out that I was appearing on the podcast 3 or about 4 minutes before it started.
Exactly. So thank you for coming on.
No problem.
And with that said, we'll proceed to close. If I can remember the DeMolay term, if there's no further business, we shall proceed to close. So, with that said, I hope everyone enjoyed. Leave your comments down below. If you want to find out more about the podcast, make sure that you like us on Facebook. We post everything there. And if you want to join a conversation, join the Discord. I'm on there. Dave is on there. We're trying to get Steve on there, but old farts and their ineptitude to technology. So yeah, and I'd also like to thank Steve for putting up with me while I've been away for the past month. He's had to run the podcast on his own, and he's done a spot-on job for the most part. And I'm back now, and I'm really happy to be back. So,
and if you want to find out anything more about DeMolay, Connor will put links to DeMolay International and DeMolay Canada websites in our text for this podcast in the comments.
Exactly. So with that said, does anyone have any final remarks that they want to make?
Go DeMolay!
Woo!
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on our wonderful organization.
Yeah.
We're always happy to have you.
Although it was last minute, it has been an absolute honor.
Wonderful. And I don't know if we announced this last time, but Dave Colbeth has officially joined Steve and I as one of our regular hosts. So you'll be seeing a lot more of him. So we now have a past DDGM from Washington. Which, on that note, Steve, do we have any interesting or entertaining topics coming up that people should be aware of?
Heads up is good. Yeah, it's somewhere around there. We'll post it on Facebook.
There you go. Just throwing that at you for old time's sake.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, brethren. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Working Tools podcast.
All right.